The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the murmur of 100 different species. The Zalvoran stood at the center, exuding confidence. Their warlord, clad in ceremonial armor, addressed the assembly with amusement. Humanity had been deemed insignificant, a backwater species unworthy of concern. The council elders, the oldest and wisest of the galactic rulers, disagreed. "Never underestimate the Terrans," one of them warned. Laughter echoed through the hall. The Zalvoran had conquered countless worlds. Their war machine was unmatched, their fleets vast. No species had resisted them for long. The idea that a race of fragile, short-lived primates could pose a real threat was absurd. Earth was technologically behind. Their ships were crude compared to the sleek designs of the Council races. Their colonies were scattered, their fleets laughably small. Their history was one of internal conflict, self-destruction, and primitive warfare. The Zalvoran believed humanity would crumble at the first show of force. Their invasion began swiftly. Outer human colonies fell without much resistance, their planetary defenses shattered within days. Entire cities were reduced to rubble. Zalvoran commanders celebrated their easy victories, convinced humanity would surrender before the war even started. But something felt wrong. The humans didn't fight like other races. Where most species surrendered or scattered, the Terrans vanished into the shadows. Occupied planets became nightmarish war zones. Supply lines were severed by unseen attackers. Military outposts were destroyed overnight without any enemy ships detected in orbit. The Zalvoran began losing soldiers, not to battle, but to an invisible war waged by an enemy they couldn't see. Booby traps appeared in every occupied city. Entire squads were wiped out by seemingly abandoned buildings rigged to collapse. Plasma weapons stopped working as hacked AI systems turned Zalvoran technology against them. Their warships experienced critical system failures in mid-flight, plummeting into planetary surfaces. Still, the Zalvoran commanders refused to acknowledge the truth. These weren't victories. These were delays. They convinced themselves humanity was simply stalling for time. The final phase of their war plan was ready. Earth itself would fall next. Their invasion fleet mobilized, thousands of warships descending upon the Sol system, eager to finish what they had started. Victory was inevitable. The Terrans had no more places to run. The war would end in a matter of days. Or so they thought. The Zalvoran fleet advanced deeper into human space, expecting a swift and decisive victory. Their war doctrine was built on overwhelming firepower and brute force, tactics that had crushed countless civilizations before. But against the Terrans, nothing went as planned. The first sign of trouble came when entire squadrons went dark. Warships disappeared from their formations, not due to direct combat, but sabotage. Their navigational systems failed mid-jump, flinging them into the void. Some drifted helplessly into the gravity wells of gas giants, their distress signals ignored. The Zalvoran ground forces fared no better. Every occupied planet turned against them. Civilian populations, expected to cower in fear, became an extension of the battlefield. Cities were transformed into death traps. Snipers hidden among the ruins picked off command units with precision. Entire battalions were lured into narrow corridors where explosions collapsed buildings on top of them. It wasn't war, it was extermination. The Zalvoran adapted by reinforcing their garrisons, deploying heavier armor, and doubling security patrols. But the more they tightened their grip, the more the enemy slipped through their fingers. A seemingly abandoned outpost would erupt in a fiery explosion just as reinforcements arrived. Military bases found their power grids disabled, their food supplies poisoned. Communications became unreliable, plagued by misinformation and false orders. Then came the psychological warfare. The Zalvoran relied on discipline, order, and chain of command. Humanity shattered it. They intercepted transmissions, mimicking Zalvoran officers to issue false directives, leading entire divisions into ambushes. Captured prisoners were released, not broken, but laughing. Their words spread fear. There was no safe place in this war. The Zalvoran fleet, frustrated by their inability to break human resistance, resorted to orbital bombardment. Cities burned under relentless plasma strikes, millions of human lives lost. Yet, instead of submission, humanity became more relentless. The harder the Zalvoran struck, the more ferocious the resistance became. Then came the turning point. Humanity no longer fought just to survive. They had learned how to win. Infiltrators embedded deep in the Zalvoran chain of command sent a single command through the enemy's encrypted network. Warships turned against each other, defense systems fired on friendly units, planetary shields deactivated at the worst possible moments. The Zalvoran, for the first time in their history, were not just fighting an enemy, they were losing control of their own forces. The invasion was supposed to be a swift conquest. Instead, it had become a slow, agonizing death. And as they prepared for their final assault on Earth, the Zalvoran still failed to grasp the full extent of their mistake. The Zalvoran fleet arrived at Sol expecting a broken enemy, a world on its knees, ready for annihilation. Instead, they found a fortress. Earth was not waiting to be conquered, it was daring them to try. Orbital defenses activated the moment the first warships entered range. Hidden artillery platforms, disguised as civilian satellites, unleashed concentrated energy beams, carving through enemy hulls. Massive EMP bursts disrupted shielding systems, leaving even the most advanced Zalvoran vessels vulnerable. Humanity had spent years preparing for this moment, and now the trap was sprung. The Zalvoran commanders ordered an immediate ground assault, expecting to overpower Earth's defenses with sheer numbers. Dropships descended in waves, only to be torn apart midair by automated railgun turrets. Those that reached the surface found themselves landing in zones pre-designated for destruction. Entire battalions were wiped out before they could even deploy. Underground bunkers concealed mobile strike teams that emerged from hidden tunnels, striking hard and vanishing before retaliation could follow. Drone swarms filled the skies, overwhelming enemy formations with precision strikes. The Zalvoran were used to facing organized militaries, not an enemy that could blend into its own environment, adapting faster than they could react. Orbit was no safer. Humanity had mastered electronic warfare, and the Zalvoran fleet found itself fighting against its own systems. Ships lost control, weapons misfired, targeting solutions scrambled. The very AI cores meant to aid their conquest had been hijacked, feeding them false data, turning their formations into chaotic, panicked masses. Then came the final blow. A human counterfleet, hidden behind the shadow of Saturn's rings, executed a perfectly coordinated ambush. Warships emerged from stealth, launching kinetic bombardments that tore through the already fractured Zalvoran lines. It was no battle, it was a massacre. The fleet commander, once so confident in victory, now faced an unthinkable reality. They had underestimated humanity, ignored every warning, and now they were paying the price. The retreat order came too late. The Zalvoran forces that had once sought to erase humanity were now the ones desperately trying to escape. But humanity was not feeling merciful. One by one, Zalvoran vessels were hunted down, their escape routes cut off. Some surrendered. Others fought to the bitter end. None made it home. Earth, the world they had sought to crush, had stood unbroken. The war was over. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the reports came in. The Zalvoran fleet was gone, wiped from existence. A species that had once ruled through fear and domination had been reduced to nothing. The warnings had been ignored, and now the consequences were undeniable. Survivors who escaped the battlefield brought stories that spread across the stars. Stories of ships turning against their own, of weapons failing at the worst possible moments, of entire legions vanishing without a trace. But above all, they spoke of the Terrans, relentless, merciless, and utterly unbreakable. The Council had expected humanity to lose, or at best, to survive by begging for peace. Instead, they had done something far worse. They had won. And they had done so with a level of brutality that sent a clear message to every species watching. The Zalvoran homeworld braced for retaliation, but none came. Humanity had no interest in conquest. They didn't need to rule through force. Their victory alone had reshaped the balance of power, No empire, no council, no warlord would ever look at them the same way again. Diplomatic envoys were sent, desperate to re-establish ties before humanity decided to strike again. The Terrans responded with calculated patience. There was no need for threats. Their actions had already spoken loud enough. From this moment forward, no species in the galaxy would ever see them as weak. No empire would ever consider them insignificant. The phrase that had once been spoken as a warning was now a law burned into the minds of every ruler in the known universe. Never underestimate the Terrans.